This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. We appreciate you being here with us. Now, we got a great show for you coming up. Right now, we have Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein. He is a prolific writer. He is the Moradasser of Kehilas Teferes Mordechai, founder of Machon Maggid Harakiah in Cedarhurst, New York. He's one of the contemporary Jewish world's most popular speakers. Respect him, our Britz Torah. He has more than 10,000 recorded Shiurim, and you can catch him at rabbidg.com. or Torah Anytime. His latest book just came out, is BaOmer, The Fire and the Soul, the Mystical Power of BaOmer, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and the Zohar HaKadosh. Rabbi Daniel Glatstein, thank you for joining us. Good luck.
Hi, good luck. How are you, Rabbi Zav?
Good, thank you. So tell us, first of all, BaOmer is not written in the Torah, is becoming more and more an important holiday. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this is a day that's definitely picking up tremendous momentum, even in our own times. You know, back in the day, you heard some people would go to Meron, some people would make the pilgrimage, and right now it's become the single most attended Jewish ritual in the entire world. As of last year, there were almost 500,000 Jews who participated in the ceremony in Meron. So this is certainly something that's worthy of our attention. Why so many people are attending Meron, and why it's picked up so much steam as of late. And in general, you know, the teachings of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai are definitely gaining a lot of momentum in our times. You know, maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when people would study Lag BaOmer or any subject in general, they would study it from more open and revealed point of view, and now it's become much more prevalent to study more of the esoteric elements of the Torah. Even people who are not experts, shall we say, in the Talmud or the Halacha, have begun, so to speak, dabbling a little bit in more esoteric portions of the Torah, and there's definitely a significant reason for that, based on the idea that as we come to the finish line and as we get closer to the redemption of the Jewish people, you know, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai predicts that in the end of days, the Jewish people will have a taste of what he calls the tree of life. And the tree of life is a reference to the book of the Zohar. And that taste will usher in the final redemption. So it's
you have a personal connection to Lag BaOmer, family connection of, I believe it was your grandfather who was saved on Lag BaOmer?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That among all the other various significance to Lag BaOmer, for me personally, my grandfather, as we've discussed in the past, is a survivor of the Holocaust, and he was in Dachau in 1945 in April. And Dachau was liberated in the end of April 1945, but there were some Jews who were put on the cattle cars, who were going to be taken to their death, my grandfather included, and he was liberated shortly after. He was liberated shortly after, a few days after the liberation of the rest of the camp, and that actually turned out to be Lag BaOmer. So it's a day of mercy for not only Jewish people, but for my family personally.
Now, what's fascinating is that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is associated with Lag BaOmer, you mentioned before, but is there any clear indication that he actually passed away on Lag BaOmer? Do we have any record of that?
So, you know, you bring up a very good point. It's almost it's commonly accepted, and yet we do not have an authoritative source that, in fact, it is the day of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's passing. It's based on a passage in the writings of the Reb Chaim Vital that it's the day of his Hilula. Hilula literally means the day of his celebration. But the Chida tells us that the writings of Reb Chaim Vital, there many errors have crept into it, and therefore we do not, the Chida says, have an authoritative source that it's Reb Shimon bar Yochai's yahrzeit. It's, so to speak, something that the Jewish people have accepted to commemorate his passing on this day.
Why? Why has it been associated with him if we're not sure if he passed away that day?
So why is Reb Shimon associated with this day? It's a great mystery. It's just something that the Jewish people took upon themselves. What's amazing is there are other reasons for the significance of Lag BaOmer associated somewhat with Reb Shimon. For example, there's an echo here, right?
Go ahead. I don't hear the echo, but go ahead.
There's the Chassam Sofer supplies a number of very interesting discoveries regarding Lag BaOmer. For instance, Chassam Sofer tells us that the mun began to fall for the Jewish people on Lag BaOmer. This is based on the idea, they leave Egypt on Pesach, and of course, the Gemara tells us that the mun, that the matzah that they took out of Egypt lasted for 30 days. So that's going to take them to the 14th day of Iyar. And you read the psukim, simply the mun began to fall the very next day. However, Chassam Sofer brings a very obscure medrash that the mun did not fall until 3 days later. So instead of it falling on the 15th day of Iyar, it fell on the 18th day of Iyar. 18th day of Iyar is Lag BaOmer. So that's one possibility of the significance of Lag BaOmer. Now, what's interesting is that in the Zohar, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is referred to as the mun that fell for the Jewish people. So that establishes a connection between Lag BaOmer, which is the day of the falling of the mun, and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who the teachings he provided for the Jewish people are considered like the mun. So why is Lag BaOmer called his day of celebration, his day of Yartzeit? There are achronim that do write that, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, Reb Tzadok HaKohen, but as mentioned, the Chida says that we don't really have an authoritative source that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai passed away on this day. One of the biggest mysteries is that there's a tradition the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, which is also, where does it say that? What's the basis for that? The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara in Yevamos that says the students of Rabbi Akiva passed between Pesach and Shavuos doesn't say they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer. The Meiri brings a tradition from the Gaonim that they stopped on Lag BaOmer. But if you think about it, is that really a reason to celebrate? That they stopped dying? You know why they stopped dying? Because they're all dead. So that seems to be an unusual reason to celebrate.
I wonder if you want to comment. Rabbi Henkin writes that the students of Rabbi Akiva, the reason why they died during this period is they were actually fighting the Romans in the Bar Kokhba revolt.
Okay, so that's a very interesting point, and that could help us understand the following. We know that this time of the year is a time of public mourning for the Jewish people. It's communal mourning, and isn't that unusual? The students of Rabbi Akiva, their departure, their death creates public mourning. Were they the greatest sages who ever lived, that we have public mourning for their death? Why don't we mourn the death of many righteous who were died or killed throughout Jewish history? We don't have any shortage of tzaddikim who died in Jewish history. But the students of Rabbi Akiva were the most righteous, the greatest scholars in history, that we commemorate their death more than anybody else. So actually, in light of what you said, let's think about that. They were soldiers for Bar Kokhba. Who was Bar Kokhba? Rabbi Akiva thought he was Mashiach. He was the Redeemer. Was Rabbi Akiva wrong? Was he totally in error? Was Rabbi Akiva mistaken? If Rabbi Akiva thought Bar Kokhba was a Mashiach, that must mean he had the legitimate potential to bring redemption for the Jewish people. And what would have happened if Bar Kokhba would have been the Redeemer? He would have built the third Beis HaMikdash. So the fact that the students of Rabbi Akiva died, that is not just mourning the loss of Torah scholars. That means that Bar Kokhba's attempt to be the Redeemer for the Jewish people was frustrated, and it didn't come to fruition. And the third Beis HaMikdash that would have been built was not built, and the Mashiach that was supposed to come didn't come. So in a way, this time of the year is worse than Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is mourning the destruction of the second temple. Sfira then, in light of the idea that the students of Rabbi Akiva were associated with Bar Kokhba, and he never came to fruition, this time of the year is really mourning the loss of the third Beis HaMikdash, and that's a lot more painful than the loss of the first and the second.
But there is some consolation, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we added a fourth blessing to benching, which is for the Haruge Beitar, those that were killed in Beitar, the last stronghold of Bar Kokhba. And you would think that when they buried the bodies, it didn't stink, and we made a bracha benching a Tova Meitiv. Based on this, shouldn't we do a lamentation for it? But the mere fact that they died solely as good Jews, their actions didn't sting. That's why we celebrated. So there is a cause of celebration if you want to look at that concept of why we added to benching to the Bar Kokhba revolt.
Yeah, look, there's some lining that's redemptive. Yes.
Our guest is Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein. His fascinating new book is called The Mystical Power of Lag BaOmer. It's Lag BaOmer, the Fire and the Soul, The Mystical Power of Lag BaOmer, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and the Zohar HaKadosh. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Coming up a little while, Rabbi Yochanan Popko will be looking at the closing of the Frum Mine. Other guests will be joining us later on during the course of the show. Don't go away. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Talkline Network.
Sfassmans have been in the jewelry wholesale business for 40 years and opened their first store location in Crown Heights 12 years ago. They've gained a following well beyond Crown Heights and now open their second location in the heart of Surfside, Florida on Harding Avenue. They specialize in bridal, special occasion, custom, and everyday fine jewelry. Visit either of their two locations on Instagram or via their website, tjewelers.com. That's tjewelers.com.
Join Dirshu's momentous gathering at the Prudential Center in New Jersey on Sunday, June 9th during the Shloshes Yimei Agbola at a once-in-a-lifetime experience to prepare for Kabbalas HaTorah with a commitment to learning the Gemara of Shabbos and the laws of Shabbos. Celebrate with Dirshu at this pivotal moment in history as the Daf Hayomi B'Halacha Lomdim begin Mishnah Berurah Hilchos Shabbos Chelik Gimel and the Amud Hayomi Lomdim continue Masechta Shabbos, thereby revolutionizing the Torah world. You'll be treated to inspirational speakers and top Jewish singers to enhance your experience. That's Sunday, June 9th at 5:30 p.m. at the Prudential Center. Don't miss this historic gathering. Call 929-522-1121 right now for reservations. That's 929-522-1121 or online at dirshusiyum.org. That's dirshusiyum.org.
The Jewish Press is the largest independent weekly Jewish newspaper in the United States. It's packed with in-depth articles, interesting podcasts, information about the Jewish world, political and religious commentary, and more. Visit jewishpress.com or to subscribe to the print edition or advertise, call 718-330-1100. That's 718-330-1100.
Hi, this is Rabbi Simon Jacobson, excited to invite you to my radio show, My Life, Tanya Applied, every Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos from 10 to 10:30 p.m. on WSNR 620 AM and online, talklinecommunications.com. Please join me for this exhilarating journey where we will apply the deepest teachings of Torah to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
Hey, it's New York Times bestselling author and ghostwriter Michael Levin, and books are my babies. Here's an amazing idea for a gift for a loved one or friend, or perhaps for yourself. A family memoir, a business book, or any other kind of book written and published just for you. My company, Jewish Leaders Books, offers ghostwriting, publishing, marketing, and distribution of books onto Amazon and through Simon & Schuster, distribution into brick-and-mortar Barnes & Noble bookstores and even into airport bookstores. You can get a framed photo of the cover design to give as the perfect gift. To learn more about how Jewish Leaders Books can get your book done for you or for a friend or loved one, contact my friend Zev Brenner at 212-769-1925, extension 100, or drop him an email at zev@talklinenetwork.com. Again, that's 212-769-1925, extension 100, or write to Zev at zev@talklinenetwork.com, and we will get your book going for you.
Hi, this is Yaakov Searle from the Queens Jewish Link and Bukharian Jewish Link. I just want to thank all 350 people and our sponsors who participated in the networking event. Our newspaper is distributed all over Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Long Island, and you can get a copy. And you're welcome to advertise with us to the vast audience that we have. And just call 917-549-6145, 917-549-6145 for any information concerning the newspaper or advertising. Thank you so much. Yaakov Searle here.
And every month the Shabbos show.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner, our guest, Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein, just with us for a little while longer. His fascinating new book is called BaOmer, The Fire and the Soul, The Mystical Power of BaOmer, Rabbi Shimon Yochai, and the Zohar HaKadosh. You mentioned, Rabbi Glatstein, that the Sefira period is a day of mourning and sadness. However, you also write, and what I learned is that, just like Atzeres, Shmini Atzeres, we have a holiday attached to the end of Sukkot, follows the end of Sukkot, but really there is a similar kind of situation with Pesach, where the Atzeres, the end of Pesach, is really Shavuos. So really, the weeks of Sefira are, in a sense, are like Chalamo. There are for Sukkot, there are for Pesach and Shavuos. So it's really time of celebration.
Yeah, excellent point. And the Ramban, Rabbi Yochai, teach us that the days in between Pesach and Shavuos are likened to Chol HaMoed, which would explain why we just read the Shabbos in Parshas Emor of not only Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos, but also the days of Sefira are mentioned in Parshas Emor, which is the Parsha of the Moadim. If Sefira was just days of mourning, why would they be mentioned in Parshas Emor? But that indicates that fundamentally the days of Sefira are days of holiday, but they've, so to speak, been uprooted and changed, transformed into days of mourning because of the students, the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva. So actually, then on Lag BaOmer, which is the one day that they didn't die, Lag BaOmer then restores, the day of Lag BaOmer is restored to its biblical status of a Yom Tov. So in other words, Lag BaOmer is not just a rabbinic holiday, but because the students of Rabbi Akiva didn't die on that day, so then it is restored to its original status of it being a biblical holiday. So it's much more basic than just a commemoration of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's yahrzeit, but it's actually a biblical holiday.
So it should be treated as such. And by the way, you also write about why usually when we have a special day, we make a shechianu, a special prayer, blessing. Why don't we do so the first night when we make the Sefira Somer, when we start counting the 49-day period, which leads to Lag BaOmer? Why don't we also make a shechianu?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the Rishonim discussed that, the various reasons why. It may be tied to the fact that Sefira is a time of mourning. It's a very interesting. Shabbos before Musaf, we say the Tefillah of Harachamim. However, if it's a day that we would ordinarily not say Tachnon, we omit Av HaRachamim with the exception of the days of Sefira. During Sefira, we always say Av HaRachamim. And the reason is, Av HaRachamim was composed for the tragedies that happened during this time of the year, what we call Gezeras Tatnu, the Gezeras of 1096, the massacres of the Crusades. So that's another tragedy that happened during this time of the year. So this
and
time,
the reason being after Easter, when the masses got all fired up, is when they actually went on the killing sprees against Jews.
Yeah, right. So the days of Sfira are days of mourning, not only for Sunsa Rabbi Akiva, but for even tragedies that happen closer to our times. And
but why don't we say Shechianu? First of all, the first night of Sfira is the second night of Pesach, where there is no mourning in that period anyway. Why don't we make a Shechianu then?
Yeah, so there are various approaches. One is that these days are days of din, midat din. And that's the reason why various tragedies happened on it. Additionally, there's an idea that it's incorporated into the Shechianu of Pesach, because, as you mentioned, the days of Sfira are
first night or the second night of Pesach. Is it incorporated?
It would be the first night, really. In other words, when we make the Shechianu on Pesach, that kicks off all of the various mitzvos that are upcoming, including the upcoming Sfiras HaOmer, which would be the following night. So that also indicates that what you mentioned, that Sfiras HaOmer are the days of Chol HaMoed between Pesach and Shavuos. Therefore, it's subsumed in the Shechianu we make on Pesach.
But then again, come the holiday of Sukkot, we make a Shechianu at the beginning of the holiday on Kiddush. Doesn't exempt us from making Shechianu on the Lulav or sitting in the Sukkah.
Right, but the days of Sfira, but it does exempt us from the Shechianu on the day. In other words, the days of Sukkot. We don't make another Shechianu on the second day or the third day. So the days of Sfira would then be considered like the Chol HaMoed, as you mentioned, between Pesach and Shavuos. So that question, there are at least 10 answers found in the Rishonim why we don't make the Shechianu on the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer.
Now, of course, Lag BaOmer is coming up, and so here's a question, though. If somebody gets up in shul before he actually made the bracha, before he made the blessing on counting the Sfira, he said, tonight's Lag BaOmer, is he exempt from making a bracha because he said tonight's Lag BaOmer?
Okay. So first of all, he definitely didn't count the weeks, right? So that
okay.
Also, Lag BaOmer is clearer that he didn't mean to say what day of the Omer it is. It's just an expression. So in other words, he didn't say it's the 33rd day of the Omer. He just gave it the day's name. But I was discussing on Shabbos. There are various customs. Do you say BaOmer or La Omer? I don't know. Are you able to do like a poll of your audience? I know you have millions of listeners all across the globe. If we could, could you do a poll? Do you say BaOmer or La Omer?
I would say most people probably say BaOmer, right? I'm just going to speculate because that's how the holiday is known. So people say Lag BaOmer, right?
Right. So for Lag BaOmer, it's Ba. Nobody says Lag La Omer. But many, when they count Sfira, they say Hayom Shisha ve'esrim yom shehem shlosh shvuos v'chamish yomim. Many say La Omer. I've been saying La Omer. The Rama seems to say BaOmer. The Taz says BaOmer. The Arizal, the Shla, they say La. It seems like the ancient custom of Minhag Ashkenaz was to say La Omer. The Mishnah Berurah says most Achronim say La Omer. Elsewhere he says BaOmer. So it's a little bit. It's a complex subject. Maybe one day you'll do a poll.
Being read. Actually, we have a pollster that asks different polling questions about Orthodox Jews. Mark, maybe we'll ask him to include that question in one of his surveys.
I would like to get an answer to that. See on your,
I'll have to speak to him about. He's the official pollster. But let me ask you this question: if that's the case, if I say Lag BaOmer and I don't really mean it, I can still make the bracha and say it. Why do we say last night was 24 or last night was 25? Let's just say tonight's 25. What consequences is there?
No, so if you say tonight's the 26th night of the Omer.
I don't know if I say tonight is 25. People say, what's tonight? So people say, last night was 24.
Right.
But if I said last night is 25, there's a problem. What's the problem if I didn't say 25th day of the Omer? I just say tonight's 25.
If you say tonight's 25, it may be a problem because you're saying the number of, you refer to in the Omer account, as opposed to when you say tonight's Lag BaOmer, you're just saying the name of the holiday. But that's why that there's a joke. They say, what's for supper? So last night we had chicken.
Right.
So.
No, but I'm just saying, in other words, if I'm saying it's just 20, I'm not saying the weeks.
If somebody says what's tonight and you say 26 and you just say the number 26, then that's not much of an issue.
So why do we have the whole thing? We say last night was 25. Why are we going to say it's 26?
Yeah, that's people have their things that they're very careful about, but it's to avoid saying tonight is the 26th night of the Omer.
You mentioned the Ramah. Is there a connection between him and Lag BaOmer?
Oh, the good question. But first of all, I'm leading a trip this week. We're leaving Wednesday night. We're going to Krakow, and we're going to be in Krakow for Shabbos at the yard site of the Ramah. The Ramah's yard site is Lag BaOmer, and the Ramah was one of the Piskei Ashkenaz. The halachos of the Ashkenazim are based on the rulings of the Ramah, and it's interesting that the Ramah and Reb Shimon bar Yochai, these two tzaddikim, passed away on the same day, Lag BaOmer. Like, what's the connection between the Ramah and Reb Shimon bar Yochai? One interesting commonality between them is they're the two tzaddikim that their fathers' names were seared onto their name. So, for instance, Reb Shimon bar Yochai, nobody knows him as Reb Shimon. He's not Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva. He's Reb Shimon bar Yochai. His father's name is seared onto his name. The same thing with the Ramah. Rav Moshe Isserless. Isser was the father of the Ramah. So this indicates that both of these Gedolim in their respective fields, whether it's Kabbalah or Halacha, were not innovating new practice, but they were continuing the ancient tradition. So the Ramah is, by the way, in Europe, for hundreds of years, people would pilgrimage to the kever of the Ramah, especially if they couldn't go to Meron. And there are many notable Rabbanim in Krakow, and part of being a rabbi in Krakow is you would have to give the annual drasha in the Ramah Shul in honor of his the Ramah's yard site. A little interesting tidbit about the Ramah. If you ever open up the text of the Shulchan Aruch, whenever the Ramah has a comment, he always begins with Haga. Haga means footnote. Haga. And in the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, in middle of his conversation, he says Haga. He says a few words, and then he says Haga again, which is unusual. He's still talking. Why does he use the word Haga? Haga means a note. So the numerical value of the word Haga, Hey Gimel Hey, is 13. And many authors would always begin their works with the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, 26. So the Ramah's way of beginning his work with the name of Hashem is Haga, 1313, which equals 26, which is the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Fascinating. So before we let you go, any other thoughts on Lag BaOmer that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, one interesting thing is that the Chassam Sofer, in a way, in a tshuva, criticizes Lag BaOmer. He says, since when is the day of the passing of a tzaddik a festive day, a joyous day? The day a tzaddik passes should be a day of mourning. And the Chassam Sofer writes, all we know from the poskim is that on Lag BaOmer we don't say tachnan, we don't eulogize, and even that I don't know the reason for. So the Chassam Sofer, in his responsa, you can look it up in your Ardeas and Reish Lamed Gimel 233. He says, I don't know the reason for Lag BaOmer. I don't know why people celebrate Lag BaOmer. And yet, nobody more than the Chassam Sofer supplied more interesting reasons for Lag BaOmer. He says that the mun fell. He says that after the Jews left Egypt, it took 33 days until their souls acclimated into their bodies. The Chassam Sofer says that Lag BaOmer begins the final 16 days of Sfira that correspond to the mitzvah of Chesed, which is the one pillar upon which the world stands that we still have full access to. Torah, we lost a lot of it with the Chorban. The Avodah, we lost it entirely. Chesed was unaffected by the Chorban. Chassam Sofer writes many, many reasons for Lag BaOmer. So I think it's worthy of note. Here, the Chassam Sofer writes in his Halacha book, he doesn't know the reason for Lag BaOmer, but in his Sifrei Drush, and he supplies so many reasons. So it seems a little bit of a contradictory, but it shouldn't be contradictory. And this is important for every Jew to have clarity in. And that is, in the realm of Halacha is a different realm than the realm of Jewish thought, of mysticism, of machshava. And even though the Chassam Sofer had great reverence for the world of Kabbalah and mysticism, that still is not a halachic rationale for the celebration of Lag BaOmer, and therefore it's important. Chassam Sofer writes that anyone who mixes Kabbalah and halacha is in violation of klayim, of like shatnez. These are two distinct realms. You can't utilize and marshal Kabbalah to supply rationale for halachic practice. And that's important for a person to have clarity and not to mix these two realms. The world of halacha has to be understood with a rational process using the Talmudic analysis, and you can't use mysticism to explain halachic basis. So that's.
But Lag BaOmer is a mystical holiday.
Certainly, it's a mystical holiday, and in a realm of mysticism, we get it, and yet in the realm of halacha, it remains somewhat of a mystery.
Now, by the way, maybe, there's a divide between the Misnagdim and or Litvaks and the Hasidim. On a yard side, for example, the Litvaks, at least they used to fast. I don't know if they still do. And the Hasidim have like a tikkun, they have a whole schnapps and herring, etc. Maybe that's part of the whole thing. We're saying Lag BaOmer. Your question is, do we celebrate the yard side of really Shimon Yochai?
Yeah, so what Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky would say, that originally, yard side is fundamentally a fast day. So to get out of it, they used to make a siyam, and this way, if it's a siyam, it's a sudas mitzvah, you could eat. So the siyam they couldn't do anymore, but the tikkun that remained. So
no, I'm just saying that it's similar to the Hasidic Litvak divide when it comes to the yard side. I think there's a whole process of Hasidification of Orthodoxy, which is a whole different discussion. But maybe going back to when Lag BaOmer was instituted. Maybe that was part of the rationale. Maybe it was more of a Hasidic way of thinking. I'm just speculating out loud.
Yeah, look, everybody agrees that the Shulchan Aruch says the day of the yard side is a fast day, and yet if you make a siyam, you could sort of circumvent it. So, look, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai teaches us that by tasting his offerings and his teachings, it will help usher in the redemption. So we hope through learning the Torah of Shimon on Lag BaOmer, it will bring us all closer to the redemption, and we could use it.
I want to thank you, Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein. His latest book is called Lag BaOmer, The Fire and the Soul, The Mystical Power of Lag BaOmer. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the Zohar HaKadosh. Thank you for joining us. What's your next sefer, your next book going to be about?
I have a sefer, Be'ezus Hashem, coming out in Hebrew on Chinuch Habanim, on raising children. And then in English, I'm working on a translation of the Chafetz Chaim Sefer Tzipisa L'Yeshua, which is a book about yearning for the redemption, and various essays about how to incorporate the yearning for the redemption as part of our daily routine.
Wonderful. Looking forward to that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein here on the Talkline Network. When we come back, we'll speak to Rabbi Elchanan.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.